The Denver Broncos running back group is going to have to shoulder the load against the Kansas City Chiefs defense, especially without J.K. Dobbins. What can we expect? We'll dive into that here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network in the country. All thanks to all you everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for tuning in, making us your first listen however you choose to do so. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos credential reporter for Mile High Sports. I cover the team person in daily in Dove Valley. Sayre Bedinger is back from Disney World, folks. He's the longtime site expert over there, predominantlyorange.com. 10 plus years running of him covering this football team as well. And we got a lot to break down on today's episode of the show here as our final preview before the Broncos take on the Kansas City Chiefs. Harvey, Jaleel, McLaughlin, two names who will probably shoulder the load in the run game here for the Broncos as it's trending for J.K. Dobbins to not play in Sunday's game. We'll talk about the Broncos running back room. Plus, we'll go through why Lil'Jordan Humphrey returned to the Mile High City. Why does Sean Payton bring him back? What is he going to bring to the table against the Kansas City Chiefs? And then we're going to talk about players we feel like have the most pressure on them this week against Kansas City, including a Broncos secondary without Patrick Surtain II. You'll get all of that on today's show, brought to you by our friends over there at the GameTime app. Download the GameTime app today. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Sayre, hopefully you could bring some of your Disney World magic here to the Denver Broncos on Sunday as they face off against the Kansas City Chiefs. Trending towards J.K. Dobbins not playing in this game, Sayre. He was not at practice on Wednesday. He was not at practice on Thursday. Denver's obviously got one more practice here today. But the fact he wasn't there on Thursday, I think, is a telling sign that he is not going to be ready to play here against KC.
Very unfortunate, and we kind of maybe got a little bit of a hint to this, right, from J.K. Dobbins himself. We don't often see him going on Twitter and ranting about anything. Obviously, we've only had him in Denver this season, but he was pretty upset about the hip drop tackle that wasn't called against him. I'm sure you discussed that already. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It doesn't feel like he's going to be playing in this game, although for the time being, at least as the time we're recording this, he's avoided injured reserve, which is good news for the Denver Broncos and for J.K. Dobbins, who's trying to get another contract with the team. But you mentioned that Disney magic, Cody. I mean, shoot, the Broncos, they were 0-4 on my Disney trips previously, a donut, and they went 2-0 in this trip. So the Disney magic might be working in their favor. We'll see if it carries over against the Kansas City Chiefs. But obviously, we expect Harvey to be playing a huge role in this game. Sean Payton, Courtland Sutton, Bo Nix, all those guys gushing about him at their media availability. It's always been the next man up mentality under Sean Payton, and this is a great opportunity for Harvey to prove to this team, man, this is a second-round running back. Now you got to go out and show that you can be a featured guy in this offense.
And to be honest with you, really outside of the passing attack, RJ hasn't been featured, I think, as much as you and I have wanted. And I don't know if that's been by design or with JK being the leading, obviously, carrier for this offense. The most carries RJ has had so far in his NFL career was 14. That came against Cincinnati. That was a little bit of a different game there. It was to the point where you and I were like, hey, this is the formula. You know, you get, I think, what was it, 16-something carries or touches for J.K. Dobbins in that game, 14 for RJ. All right. You almost had 200 all-purpose yards combined between the two of them in that game. Is like, all right, hey, this is the formula. This is the way, series to series. And really, if you look at his average so far, RJ's maybe having, handed the football off to him maybe 4 times in a game. I mean, if you're lucky, that's the average. I think the next highest was like 8, but it's been sporadic in terms of how often the Broncos have used him in the run game. And when they are getting him in the run game, it's mainly on outside runs. You need more of those in between the tackles type runs. I think this week here against Kansas City, RJ is going to be a big part of that too. And we cut up with Broncos offensive tackle Mike McGlinchey this week and asked him about Harvey, what he brings to the table. Here's what McGlinchey had to say about the Broncos rookie running back.
He's a unique back. Well, obviously the talent that he has and the movement skills and the strength is really, really impressive. He's a great worker, and I think he's in a room where a lot of the guys in there, like JK, like Jaleel, those guys that show him how to do things right, and he's gotten better and better every week. Lou's done a great job in that room this year. We've improved the way that we've run the ball, and it's a testament to those guys for sure.
There's no doubt that the running game has improved based on last year, but I think up to this point, it's been pretty much all on the shoulders of J.K. Dobbins, right? So that's where we talk about this opportunity for R.J. Harvey, because right now he's averaging just 5 carries a game, right? 50 carries through 10 games so far this season. He's getting way more, I guess, prominent involvement in the passing game, where it kind of feels like he has been a little bit unleashed on some downfield stuff, after the catch stuff. He's seeing a mixture of ways that the Broncos are getting him involved as a pass catching weapon. But now is this opportunity here to really show that he's got that strength, that explosiveness, the quickness, the vision that George Paton talked about all the way back at the draft, right? He said, we thought he might have the best vision of any back in this draft. Well, you're going to need it going up against a Kansas City Chiefs defense that is going to be absolutely attacking the line of scrimmage, with how vulnerable the Broncos have shown that to be the last couple of games, especially their quick passing game not really flourishing the way that you thought it would. You got a rookie running back out there. Bo Nix, not necessarily been the most accurate downfield in the last couple of games. This is where RJ Harvey's top skills have to shine the most.
And look, I think you have to sprinkle in Jaleel McLaughlin as well. Sean was saying he was chomping at the bit to get out there. I've had a chance to just catch up with Jaleel here and there throughout the season. He's maintained being in good spirits. He's ultra competitive, wants to be out there, wants to be active on game days. This is his opportunity. And look, I think it's a great chance for him to kind of come out here. And I know we'll probably preview this later as we talk about players with the most pressure, the players that we're going to have our eyes on in this game. Go out there and showcase, like, hey, this is why you should be playing me right now. I think there's a great opportunity, a great case to be made for both of these guys here. And we don't know right now, obviously, with the JK thing, that I think the more time that goes on, yes, him not going on an IR is a big thing, but we are still, I think, awaiting a word on what that second opinion was that he was seeking initially on his foot. Those are, every time you hear the word second opinion, sometimes it's always kind of concerning there. So we're going to have to wait and see what obviously that brings. But what is it in your opinion? Because you and I haven't had a chance to talk about this since you've been gone here. I've brought it up a few times on the show here. I think the biggest key, whether if JK was playing or not, that Sean Payton has to do to get this run game going a little bit more. Like we talk about them being a top 5 rushing offense. But I think the balance in terms of how often the Broncos are running versus passing is certainly a problem here for this team. And I think the first half of the last 2 games is a great indicator of just that.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you talk about early down success, getting yourself behind the sticks, penalties, nullifying big plays. I mean, you can't run the ball effectively when you're in 1st and 20 or 1st and 15 or all these bad situations, 2nd and 12, 3rd and 13. I mean, there's a reason why the Broncos aren't running the ball balanced or as effectively as you would think. We're getting a couple of drives every game, right? From J.K. Dobbins, the J.K. Dobbins takeover drive. Those are seemingly still happening on a week-to-week basis. But yeah, the consistency hasn't been there because the offensive efficiency on the early downs is not there. That's got to be the common theme. I don't have it off the top of my head, Cody, and I don't know if there's any advanced stats that would show it, but I'd be willing to bet that in the games the Broncos have run the ball the best is when they're having the most success on 1st down. That's got to be the situation right there, is those drive starters, the ability to pick up 3rd and short and extend drives and keep the drives alive, because otherwise you're just not running enough plays. Otherwise you're just not getting enough chances to have balance, and you're either playing from behind or you feel like you're getting so far behind the sticks that if you don't throw it, you're kind of just punting on 3rd down. So that's where I feel like the Broncos right now are sort of losing that offensive identity of being balanced and being a team that can win after the catch, that quick passing game that's such a hallmark in Sean Payton's offense. It all goes back to effectiveness and efficiency on 1st down.
I've talked to a couple of offensive players this week in the locker room when we get a chance to go in there and just asking you basically, what is it that you guys feel like is causing like the struggles you guys are having on offense? And the common theme amongst everybody that I asked was, we are playing behind the sticks far too often. He says we have too many penalties impacting our flow and our operation. And obviously on Thursday night, there was one specific play. Denver, I think, had like a 4 or 5 yard run on 2nd down, or, I think it was a run. I definitely think it was there because they started getting it going. And then there was a holding call and it made it 2nd and 20. And that's when the Bo Nix hot mic on the personnel thing kind of came to fruition there. 2nd and 20, and you're still late getting your personnel in after you have the penalty. So that was a frustrating standpoint there. But they're like, we've got to figure out how to get ahead of the sticks, because when we have these negative plays and setting us back, it changes what we can do from a game plan standpoint. And that makes a lot of sense. I think when you look at the X's and O's of the game and you understand it, that's definitely something that stands out. So can they do that against the Kansas City Chiefs here this week? That is the big question. But Broncos country, we have one final injury report update for you following Thursday's practice. Plus, guess who's back? Back again. Lil'Jordan Humphrey's back. Tell a friend. We'll break it all down here on this episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at PrizePicks. Folks, you and I, we make decisions every single day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, the NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action than right now, because if you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest and the easiest way to play. You just pick more or less on at least two players' stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere that PrizePicks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. And look, you can take a look at some of your favorite players like Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton. You can even look at RJ Harvey this week, as he's going to get extensive touches and looks against Kansas City. Do you like him more or less on a rushing yard statistic? Well, inside PrizePicks, you can obviously select that as one of your plays. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right.
It was never goodbye for Lil'Jordan Humphrey and the Denver Broncos. Just to see you real soon. The Lil'Jordan Humphrey went to the Giants, a little cup of coffee there, spent some time on the practice squad. He's back in Denver. The Broncos, they didn't make any moves at the trade deadline, but they've got Lil'Jordan Humphrey back in the mix. Cody and I are going to tell you why at least I feel a little more excited about this than I thought that I would. Feel like he could play a huge role in this offense here in the second half. We're going to tell you exactly what that is on today's show. But Broncos country, want to say thank you once again to every single one of you everydayers out there that make us your first listen of the day every day. We appreciate you so much. And hey, as we get into the second half of this season, let's lock in for a Broncos AFC West Division title run. It starts this Sunday against the Kansas City Chiefs. Cody, the Broncos have a chance to bury their division rivals here, and Lil'Jordan Humphrey is back to bury some more defensive backs in the running game and the quick passing game. I think that's the area where he can really be a huge, tremendous asset to this team, where I feel like Trent Sherfield, it's been a bit underrated because it's not a top talking point or storyline. But I don't feel like Trent Sherfield has necessarily been this big time addition to the running game like the Broncos maybe thought that he could be. A run blocker, special teams ace. What Lil'Jordan Humphrey did so well last year hasn't been effectively replaced in this offense. So now he's back. I think he can unlock that quick passing game and the outside running game.
Yeah, that's the hope too. And look, I saw all the memes on social media when Lil'Jordan Humphrey was coming back. People were doing like the Pawn Stars thing. Like, you want Jalen Waddle, the best I can offer is Lil'Jordan Humphrey. Like the memes kind of wrote itself. It's funny, fantastic stuff there. But this is, I'm not trying to hype this up, Broncos country. I'm just telling you from a value standpoint for what Denver wants to do, Lil'Jordan Humphrey is going to provide some immediate impact. Now, I'm not saying he's coming in, he's going to catch 2 passes or that, but the blocking, as Sayre alluded to, is important. Special teams is important, where he's going to obviously play a role right away. Now, with what we've seen from the Broncos this year, especially with Bo Nix using his legs to try to extend plays, we're not seeing Bo run as much with his legs, but we're seeing him use his legs to try to throw downfield or to find open guys in the scramble drill. Who excelled the most in scramble drill in Denver over the last couple of seasons, Sayre? Is number 17, Lil'Jordan Humphrey. Yes, that's his number now, once again, as it was in 2023. He switched to 84 in 2024. Now he's back to number 17, vacated previously by Devon Vela, who's now with the New Orleans Saints. But Lil'Jordan Humphrey brings that blocking dynamic to the table. And look, we've seen Denver run more RPOs, and we see the screen plays, Sayre. This is where he could block well on the perimeter to open some things up last year. It's no secret that last year, when the Broncos were running the screen game to Troy Franklin and to Marvin Mims, who was the primary blocker up there on the perimeter? Cortland Sutton and obviously Lil'Jordan Humphrey. We weren't complaining about the screen game last season. This year, we certainly are.
Yeah, that's what he's going to help unlock again. I just really believe that. I do. I think that he's so physical downfield. And I also feel like, Cody, you can tell me if you think I'm maybe off base on this or if I'm overthinking it a little bit here. I feel like Lil'Jordan Humphrey doing that dirty work could really open things up for Pat Bryant to play a bigger role as a receiving weapon as well, because we know Pat Bryant can run block. He's all about, if you don't block, you don't get the rock. I feel like he's one of those guys that we could see his target share increase here in the second half of the season. It just feels like the majority of the time that he's out there right now, he's doing a lot of run blocking out there. And I think that's great. He can do it. He's good at it. He's physical. He's willing. That's awesome. Let Lil'Jordan Humphrey do some of that stuff and get Pat Bryant running more routes, get him more targets, because Troy Franklin, I mean, the guy has been absolutely lighting it up in the targets department. It just hasn't quite been, that's been honestly, one of the biggest lack of efficiency that I don't think is getting talked about enough. I know Sean was just asked about it this week. Like, he's getting so many targets. Let's see some more involvement for Pat Bryant. With Lil'Jordan Humphrey last year, Cody, he was the second most on the team in terms of yards after contact. And so I think that what that indicates is that the Broncos trust him as well to get him the ball quickly and be physical after the catch. So I really dig this move in terms of, hey, it's not necessarily, let's not make a mountain out of a molehill, right? It's a guy that's going to play a minimal role on a week-to-week basis, at least in terms of what the box score shows. But man, when you talk about opening things up for his teammates, getting that perimeter running game going with some of your best guys that, at running on the perimeter, like, Jaleel McLaughlin coming back, RJ Harvey, this is going to be a huge move, I think, for the Denver Broncos to get that type of efficiency back in the wide receiver blocking, which we know is so important to the Sean Payton offense.
And I feel like so often at times in sports media, or even just in fandom in general, it's easy for people to look at box score and say, oh, well, yeah, this guy didn't have a big impact, but it shows up in other ways. Hitting a block. Like, I'm glad that you maybe mentioned up that this could free opportunities open, like scheme open opportunities for a guy like Pat Bryant, because of the fact that, like, how defenses are playing Denver right now, right? We talk about Cortland Sutton seeing bracket coverage. So when it's bracket coverage, passing situations, defenses are also bringing backside guys to cover Troy Franklin on those crossing patterns there, right? You got a corner and you got another guy who's spying wherever Troy Franklin's at. So you're seeing both force feed there. And I think having Marvin Mims the last couple of weeks certainly plays a role in that in terms of the distribution. I think the insertion of Lil'Jordan Humphrey, I think, makes Trent Sherfield maybe an inactive player this week, though. I say with Denver's injury list, they may have a chance to keep 6 wide receivers active here for Sunday's game against Kansas City, something that we're going to have to monitor. But I agree. I think bringing Lil'Jordan Humphrey back is going to be big in ways that maybe people aren't going to see necessarily in the stat sheet, the box score at the end of the game. But when you watch the tape, you're like, wow, that was made possible because of this guy. That's what he's going to bring to the table here. But let's get to some injury stuff here too, Sayre. Following Thursday's practice, we saw, an extensive list this week for the Broncos injury report. Pat Surtain obviously was on that list. Nate Adkins was on that list. Jonah Ellis was on that list. Trent Sherfield was on that list. The list went on and on and on. And J.K. Dobbins, well, all those guys did not return for Thursday's practice except Nate Adkins. Nate Adkins was surprisingly back on the field. And I think we're all a little surprised there, considering some of the rumblings we were hearing about, the knee injury. They bring in Mercedes Lewis to the practice squad because they need some help at that position because of the injury. There's a chance that he potentially plays here on Sunday. So he's back in the mix. But unfortunately, Thursday's practice, no PS2, no Jonah Ellis, and no J.K. Dobbins, which if you miss 2 days of practice, the signs and the chances you playing on Sunday, probably not going to be very likely. So I think you can count on those guys being out.
Let's talk about Nate Adkins here, Cody. I think that it's no coincidence that the last 2 games that he played, the Broncos scored a total of 77 points. And I'm not, once again, let's not make a mountain out of a molehill here, but the last 2 games that he didn't play, you obviously scored 10 against the Raiders. You score 18 against the Houston Texans. So the offensive efficiency is undoubtedly better, I think, when Nate Adkins is out there. Sean Payton has talked about how important he is to their operation. A number of the teammates, I know you've heard about it from other players in that locker room as well. It just helps so much. And what have we seen with like the Mercedes Lewis acquisition? He had a couple penalties, right, against the Raiders. A false start on one in which he wasn't used to Bo Nix's cadence, right? So you have now players that are back in the mix who know the cadence. They know the offense like the back of their hand. They're more of a threat in the jumbo set. That's both Lil'Jordan Humphrey and Nate Adkins there. So when you go to jumbo, what I'm noticing, Cody, is that Bo Nix has one option to throw the ball to and nobody else. And now if you've got Nate Adkins back, if you've got Lil'Jordan Humphrey back, those guys can come out in your jumbo formation. All of a sudden, instead of having just one option in the passing game when you go to jumbo, now you have 3, and that opens everything up for this offense. It just, once again, these guys are not headline makers. Like Nate Adkins, nobody in Chiefs Kingdom probably even knows who Nate Adkins is at this point. Nobody in Chiefs Kingdom cares about Lil'Jordan Humphrey. But if you're the Denver Broncos, these are 2 guys who do the dirty work for your offense and who open things up for everybody else. I just think that we have to, we as Broncos country, we have to understand the impact that players who don't get the ball make in a Sean Payton offense on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, it's one of the more exciting things to watch, and I think it's just a testament to the depth that the team currently has right now. Guys buying into their roles, even if they're not going to be the featured guys. You don't see a lot of sulking or pouting from guys, but they're happy to win. They're happy to be blocking. Pat Bryant's a great example of loving his role, even if he hasn't seen the large volume maybe that he would personally want. You never know based on talking around and being around Pat Bryant. So excited about what this could bring to the table. Hopefully the Broncos can use that as some extra juice for Sunday's game against the Kansas City Chiefs. But coming up next, Broncos country, we're going to go through and talk about which players have the most pressure on them against the Chiefs. And can Bo Nix bounce back after a rough 2-game stretch? We'll go through that and more here on today's episode of the show. Today's Locked On Broncos is brought to you by friends over there at the GameTime app. The NFL season is back, and look, there's a matchup here in the Mile High City on Sunday between the Denver Broncos at 9-2 and the 5-4 Kansas City Chiefs. If you want to see the Broncos take on the Chiefs, the GameTime app is the place to be. And honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team, which is the Denver Broncos. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout. It can be frustrating, and that's why I use GameTime. That's why you should use GameTime, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. GameTime, they're fast, they're easy, and they're backed by the GameTime guarantee. And you'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price that you pay. I recently used GameTime to take my wife to a Nuggets game. She was disappointed that Aaron Gordon was ruled out of there, but we still had a good time, all thanks to our friends over there at the GameTime app. So download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download GameTime today. As we jump in the fourth quarter of today's episode of the show, Broncos Country, all the everydayers out there, thanks once again for tuning in, making us your first listen, and for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the country. That's all because of all of you. We appreciate you so much. We've got some really exciting things coming up here at the network, so stay tuned for all of that here. But we're going to dive into some exciting things, talking about players we have our eyes on and players who maybe from an on-paper standpoint face pressure this week going against the Kansas City Chiefs. Sayre, let's start off with, obviously, Bo Nix. He's been in a rough 2-game slump, and I felt like this week I had to do an episode kind of giving context to the Bo Nix situation, because it seems like social media would have you to believe the chart bros, the acronym chart bros out there would make it believe that it's all black and white. There's no gray area. There's no room for improvement here. So we presented all sides of Bo's struggles, how Sean has struggled to put Bo in a position to see the personnel, the penalties, all that stuff. Like it's a multifaceted thing. Bo was a little different in his press conference this week. I don't know if you paid attention or noticed that. Usually he's kind of chippy. He's got a little sass to him, which we like. But it seemed like he was a little more just locked in, like focused, very somber, I think, in his approach this week. Bo, obviously, I think, is going to face pressure naturally because of the position he plays. But I also think Steve Spagnuolo is going to try to dial up pressure on him regardless in this game.
He is. He's going to force Bo Nix to do something that he hasn't done a lot of in the last 2 games, which is be an accurate passer. And I think that, look, it's not the end of the world to say that he hasn't thrown the ball accurately for 2 games. Cody, I watch baseball. You know this. A lot of the listeners know this as well. I love the Chicago Cubs. I love watching baseball every year. There's something that happens to every single team in baseball, every single season. And it happens to multiple guys over the course of a long season. Inevitably, pitchers will go through spells where they're giving up a lot of home runs, where they're missing their spots, where they have to get pulled from a game after 1 inning. The best pitchers in baseball. I saw the Cubs chase Cy Young Award winner Paul Skeens from a game after 3 innings this year because he was pitching poorly and not hitting his spots. This happens to every pitcher in the MLB. It happens to every single quarterback. This last week of the NFL, the last handful of weeks, if not even a large portion of this season, has been more proof than ever before that great quarterbacks struggle. And I'm not saying that Bo Nix has proven himself to be a great quarterback just yet, but what I am saying is that it's so ridiculous. I'm glad that I was at Disney World this last 10 days because I didn't have to be on Twitter and arguing with everybody defending Bo Nix. I feel bad for you, but I'm glad that you posted the episode that you did about it because everybody needs, I think, that perspective shift. It's okay to be frustrated with a quarterback who's going through a dry spell without saying he's not the franchise quarterback. Better fire up the mock drafts. I couldn't believe that I saw mock drafts with the Broncos taking the Oklahoma QB or Colin Cowherd talking about drafting a quarterback. Like this is bull. Like it's Bush League type stuff. Quarterbacks, this is why people say Josh Allen would have never lasted in Denver because everybody would have driven him out of the franchise after his first 2 seasons where he didn't post nearly as good of numbers. And I know then everybody's like, well, I hate the Josh Allen comparisons. You and I talked about this when we did a different video. It's like Bo Nix doesn't have to become Josh Allen. Nobody said that Bo Nix has the same level of arm talent or potential even as Josh Allen. But the point is that when you give up on players like Josh Allen or Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield, or to a lesser degree, some other guys around the league, like you give up on talented players who are getting better every single year. You and I have gotten better through the years at our profession. I could go on and on about this, Cody. I don't mean to go on a huge rant.
I love it.
And it's so frustrating to me. And I know to you and other members of Broncos Country who kind of think like us in this way.
Yeah, no, it is frustrating because it's something that anytime there's anything bad, like a bad play, it's the sky is falling. It's like, why is the sky falling for an 8-2 team? Like you can demand better play, be frustrated with play, up and down play, but he's going to make good plays too. I mean, Sayre, in this stretch, look, the completion percentage was not great against Houston, but in this 2-game slump, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions at this point. So it's not like 0 touchdowns, 7 or 8 interceptions the way the world is making it out to be. But this is going to be a tough game going against this passing defense here that Kansas City certainly has. We know Steve Spagnuolo loves to send the corner blitz. They'll blitz the nickel from time to time. We know he loves that A-gap blitz from Nick Bolton, who obviously got the ball a couple times last year. But I think that Bo's going to respond in a big way. And I'm also glad that Bo's got the mindset. He doesn't care what other people say. I thought he had a really good press conference this week, kind of just acknowledging the reality of the position and not making the game really bigger than it truly is, which I think is obviously a testament to his mindset, which is good. The other group of people that I feel like are going to have pressure on them is the secondary against this Chiefs offense that does have weapons. We know if Pat Surtain, it certainly makes things a little more problematic. I don't think Denver's going to travel their corners this week, but when you're going against Xavier Worthy, you're going against Rashee Rice, Juju Smith-Schuster, Hollywood Brown, you even have guys sprinkling like Tyquan Thornton, Travis Kelce. It certainly is a tough task for this secondary regardless.
Yeah, I know he is. I mean, when you rattle off that name, those names of those players, right? I mean, you're talking about a Chiefs offense that went from, okay, they don't really have a ton of A-list guys to now they're pretty much fully healthy at the skill positions. I know Xavier Worthy was added to the injury report on Thursday, so we'll kind of see how that materializes and what happens there. But regardless, I mean, there's multiple options, which when Patrick Mahomes has multiple options and he's able to escape pressure, your coverage can only hold up for so long against 6 guys who run a 4-2. Like that's what the Chiefs collect. That's what you just rattled off. I mean, Tyquan Thornton, Xavier Worthy, all these Rashee Rice, all these guys are very fast and they're very, very good at creating in space when they get the ball. And so that's what the Broncos have to guard against if you're that secondary. Like, and they've done a great job. Like you and I haven't got much of a chance to talk about it, but Chris Abrams-Drain filling in, Riley Moss, Jahdae Barron, Jaquan McMillan, and then the safeties, obviously. The return of Dre Greenlaw has been huge for the Broncos, I think, in terms of just overall coverage plan and things like that. The pass rush is getting home. Like the plan the Broncos have will be good. It's just a matter of, can you eliminate those second chance plays for Patrick Mahomes against these types of receivers? Because you can only cover 4-2 for so long.
Yeah, it's tough. Look, your scramble drill rules apply. You may have to cover guys twice, essentially, when you're in team meetings this week saying, hey, you got to cover initially, but then because Patrick Mahomes can scramble around, you got to cover your guy twice, whether you're zone, whether you're man. I agree with you. I think they're going to have a good plan in place. I felt like they've had a great week of practice so far, but it is a challenge, because you get out there in the game, you have a plan. You just got to hope you can counteract. This would be the perfect week for the Broncos defense there to get takeaways. I'm talking picks, fumble recoveries, strip sacks, you name it. This would be the best time to do just that here. But Broncos Country, we want to hear from you. Who are some players that you feel like have the most pressure on them to perform here in Sunday's game against the Kansas City Chiefs? Make sure you let us know here on today's episode of the show. But with that said, Broncos Country, that'll wrap up today's episode of the show. The next time you're going to see Sayre and we're going to do a Locked On Broncos squad show. Anilo Piro, myself, Sayre, and former Broncos safety Nick Ferguson will have you covered for a squad show following Sunday's game against Kansas City Chiefs. Plus, you get your normal post-game report with Sayre and myself. You get all that here on Locked On Broncos. Make sure you subscribe or follow wherever you get podcasts so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team every single day, all year long. With that said, Broncos Country, we'll see you after the game. Will the Broncos be 9-2?